geography ideas for your homeschool. This is the perfect day to talk about all things geography. I have had the privilege of going across Canada once, twice, a few times, all the way up to the Arctic, up into Inuvik, and then we flew into Tuktoyaktuk with our 3 little girls. I've not seen Newfoundland. I've not been to Nunavut, but I've been right across the country in all different areas, and it is remarkable to me how very different it is. Stunning and very different. And the same experience I've had when I've traveled across the United States. So many different experiences. When I get out of the car, it sounded like I went to another country because people spoke differently every time we stopped. And it's amazing to fill it with food and with different mores or different ways of cultural approaches or different customs. It was really interesting to be traveling across the United States, to travel across the world. I haven't been to Asia, haven't been to the Antarctic, but I've experienced different things across the world. And to bring our kids along with us, well, that is the ultimate geography tip. But since travel is just starting to open up again, how about other ideas that we could use in our homeschools whenever we start that? So get out your homeschool tip book. This is one of mine, and I put each of my kids' names in different sections, and I write down ideas for my kids for the upcoming year. Some of them I use, some of them I don't, but they're there for ideas. So something that I did do in the last few years, and I haven't even completed this book, but it's an incredible book to learn about geography the way that you would traditionally think about learning geography in Canada. It's reproducible worksheets. It has 25 maps and projects and puzzles, riddles and games, and even an evaluation form if you want to do tests. You can learn all the different provinces. This would not be surprising. You can learn all the different provinces. You could learn all the provincial capital cities. You could, though, do things a little bit more complicated. You could actually cut out different provinces and then hand them to the kids and say, which province is this based on their outline. There is a place name search. You can actually search for different places. There's focus on lakes and rivers and all sorts of different things. And really just trying to help you learn the practical stuff, the traditional stuff that you would normally learn in a schooled classroom, all about geography. Of course, something that we often miss is the arms, flags, and emblems of Canada. And we often don't dip into this kind of stuff. We might know our own province, but we don't necessarily know what flower or what flag is for another province and what emblem. And they actually show this in this book. So this is useful. And might I add that one of the places that you can get curriculum is used bookstores, old library sales, things like that. Some things don't change. But as with often happens in geography, stuff does change. In fact, I keep this lovely globe. It has most definitely changed over the years. And the map that I have on the wall, when we visited Africa, we memorized all the countries in Africa, and it turns out they did not stay the same since we last visited. Of course, you can study flat maps and always have a map, even if kids are just purely curious. You want to have a map. But why would you actually even engage things like where is something? Well, I would suggest when you're doing your read-alouds, take for instance this book that we read called The Kitchen Boy, a novel of the last Tsar by Robert Alexander. This was in the days of the Bolsheviks and the Russian Revolution. Then you can actually do a little research on the map to see where did it take place, and also learn where it moved around or where the characters were from or what they allude to in the stories. You can do that with that kind of a read aloud, or you can do it with even these little readers. Do you remember these ones? Very few words on the page, and they're really useful books to teach kids all about reading. And they're very simple stories, but they introduce places to kids as well. I have a book called Flags of the World. It is blank. It is not colored. And so what you can do if you're doing something like watching a video on YouTube or checking out Google Earth on the internet, you could always check what the actual colors are of the flags and color it in And this is really just a great way to do memory recognition. I also have this this book full of tiny flags, and we cut out all these tiny little flags, put them on popsicle sticks, and blacked out the names of the countries so that we could do a quizzing game trying to understand what all the different countries were. And of course, I think it's only my son, my 12-year-old son, that probably can do the most of those. If you don't have access to a traditional map, because we're so accustomed to having it on our screens now, we can go to a tourist office and find those. You can find them in bookstores, and obviously, probably you can find it at Chapters or a major bookstore, but you can even find it in the gas station, of course. Geography cannot be separated necessarily from, say, science or history. Okay, instinctively I think, well, of course, history, because every time a map is made, it is created because of something that happened in history, right? But we don't always ask the question, how did they decide to create these borders? Or how did they get around without maps before maps were a thing? How about all the parallel lines or all the longitude and latitude lines? How did they determine what those lines would be and where they would be? You know, that influenced the time zones in our world as well. And the meridian lines, all of those things, that's science. So geography and science, or geography and history, say the explorers, or literally any topic in history whatsoever can be associated with geography. Something fun that we would do on Fun Fridays is, that was fun / really challenging. Take a map, an outline of the world. We have a book all about these. You take this map and you say, hey kids, what country is that? And by the way, do you know? I'll tell you what it is if you put your comment down below. I would not have guessed what this country is. But I gotta say, this is a beautiful country I have not yet visited, and I would love to visit purely based on their beaches and their food. Here is a very simple, early kind of geography study. Let's take North and South Korea. So it shows you just a little bit about the map, obviously, and what the major things that happen in North and South Korea. Interesting that they combine that together, because I'm not sure they would agree that that should be combined together, but, you know, or Japan. And it's really just a very, entry-level kind of coloring book for younger children. If you haven't met the Scholastic Canada Atlas of the World, or we also have Scholastic Children's Atlas of Canada, these are fabulous books that have so much detail in them, but they're just super readable. So if you want to take a look at Saskatchewan, anybody from Saskatchewan here? I've been in Saskatchewan a few times. Notice that the terrain is awfully similar. Lots of wheat fields. But we have this cliche or this stereotype about Saskatchewan. It's not just all wheat fields. There's a lot of forest, a lot of lakes and rivers. A beautiful province. Okay, so Scholastic Children's Atlas of Canada, the Atlas of the World, and one of my very favorite resources for geography is the Trail Guide to World Geography by Geography Matters. It's considered a teacher's manual with daily geography drills. And I used it in a way like games. I didn't make it super tricky. I would just say to the kids, who can find the information first? For instance, here on week 19, we learn about Asia, and it asks, on the simple level, it says, what is the name given to the large body of land that includes the continents of Europe and Asia? Well, that would be Eurasia. I would write my answers down before we get started so that I could actually know, because I didn't always know what the answers were. And that brings me to a thought. When you're doing any of these concepts, incorporating any of this learning opportunity with your kids, remember two things. One, you don't have to know all of this. You can learn right alongside your kids. And frankly, my opinion, most moms will say the person in the household that got the best education, mom. And it's amazing and so much fun if you incorporate fun or an attitude of fun towards whatever you're doing. And that is what I would suggest to you, that I can give you all the ideas in the world, and I will. There are many, and I know there's many others that have many ideas, but start with fun. Ask your kids what they might be interested in this area. They might say nothing, that's okay too, or just invite them to do something with you. Usborne, here we are again, Usborne Books, has a Flag of the World sticker book. Very simple, kids like sticker books at a certain age, and it just gives them a little bit of exposure. Now when they get older, you can cut these out, like I'd said, put them on popsicle sticks, and then actually do a trivia game to see who can actually remember those countries. And some of them are not nearly as easy as you think. You often think that you know a lot of countries until you realize how many there actually are. And of course, I would be remiss not to tell you about the Professor Noggin's Countries of the World game. There's all sorts of card games for geography, endless games. Games make stuff fun. Unless you're like me and you don't want to play games all the time and it isn't fun. So there's other ways to do it too. Incorporate YouTube. YouTube is most definitely a resource for geography, because if you can't travel places, you can check it out on YouTube. Of course, I have to tell you about a podcast that I find super valuable. I was just listening to it this morning as I was gardening for too long because I ended up getting heat exhaustion, so I'm a little slow right now for a reason. But gardening and listening to the podcast, Homeschool High School podcast. Don't be too worried about the name. Homeschool High School is definitely the name, and its focus is on high school. But this is a podcast that focuses on ideas to include in your homeschool, and they are brilliant. There's so many fun ideas. And you remember that I told you about the book by Susan Wise Bauer, A Well-Trained Mind? Well, that is anything but self-directed learning. However, I used that for a few years, burned myself right out on it. You can use that book as a resource, use it in a different way than perhaps it was originally intended. There are brilliant ideas in there about how to engage all sorts of subjects. You could use any of those in any way. The key in the early years in homeschooling is to learn how to engage your kids. It's not always going to be fun. You do not have to do everything. Frankly, you don't have to do any of the things that I suggest. All of these are just your ideas to look for the learning opportunities in your real homeschools, to create an environment that actually seems engaging. That means you're engaged in it. That means you're showing them that you're interested in it. So you're going to choose things that you think are maybe interesting to them as well, and you include them in it. And the goal is fun. If the reason that you're doing it is to learn, then do it because you actually want to learn, not because you're telling yourself we have to memorize every country in Africa. Although that was super fun when we were actually in Africa. But it has to be because you actually want to enjoy it, not just because you told yourself you have to do it. So those are my ideas about how you can incorporate different geography ideas in your homeschool. If you have other ideas or you have something that you want to share with others, then put it in the comments down below. And happy Canada Day.